Are you unsure on how to lead and approach a client video call? Well, that's what I'm about to show you in this video. Now, the first stage is all about building a rapport with your client, especially if they're a new client and you've never met them before. This can be a great way to understand how they work and how they operate, and doing this is key. So when you hop onto a call and it just feels awkward, it's not the same as if you're in a professional setting, but also in a setting where you can have that professional relationship at the same time as, have the laugh or joke with each other. And I think that's really important, and that's a mistake a lot of people make. So when you hop onto the call, the first 5 minutes maybe should be about building a rapport. So how's your day going? Or if you know them quite well, you can talk about something specific to them. Let's say they like running, how's your running going? What's your personal best been? All that sort of thing. So it's kind of about building up a strong relationship and also easing them into the call so it's not awkward and it just doesn't feel like a forced call and like a sales call, because that's not what you want it to be. You want it to be an enjoyable call where you can plan strategies and goals and whatever it may be that you're trying to do and of their business. So that's really important. Building rapport is key. Now, obviously this goes without saying, but your whole video call should not be about their personal best run. Now, the most important thing to take away from building rapport with your client is that it helps to create both an environment of trust and comfort at the same time. The more you build rapport with your client with ease, the more open they're going to be when it comes down to talking about business later on in the call. Like I mentioned earlier, building rapport with your client is about curating and finding common ground between you and your client. And like I said, that's really important because it doesn't make the call awkward. You ease into what you're about to talk about later on. I've tried this technique. If you have too, you'll know, and you might be thinking, why does it work so well? Well, we're all human and we all like to feel that we're being spoken to and addressed directly and in a nice and comforting way, and puts confidence into your client, whatever you may be doing. So that's really important about putting confidence into them as well as putting confidence into you. So you know what you're doing later on in the call, and maybe if you suggest something to your client, then they're going to be more on board with that as they already trust you from the building rapport section of your call. Your client will naturally gravitate towards people that they feel comfortable with. And if you create that environment, that's really important, and they'll gravitate towards you rather than another business provider or service provider or whatever it may be. Building rapport is really, really important for you and your client. Okay, so after you've had a few laughs and established some rapport with your client, it's time to now get into the business side of things. And the key thing here is to have a smooth transition between rapport and business. You're not making your client feel like you're jumping straight into business, but it's a smooth transition between the building rapport and the business side of things. And both of these come together to create a nice little transition between, like I said, the laughy, jokey, fun side of things and the more serious side of things that you actually want to talk about with your client. And then you can ask them for their input. This gives them the opportunity to share their thoughts and concerns and makes them feel like an active participant in the conversation. And that's really important because maybe you'll be making them feel even more comfortable than what you were originally when you were building rapport with them earlier. And that's really crucial, making your clients feel comfortable and welcome, and also, like I said, an active participant in the conversation is really, really important if you're trying to create a relationship where you can have a serious conversation, but you can also, like I said, have a few laughs together or, share thoughts, because if you have a better relationship with them, they're more likely to get on board with you and your company, business or service, product, whatever it may be. That's really, really important. So by making them feel valued, they're more likely to get on board with you and your business as well. What happens if you've hit a snag in the conversation or your client is quite cold? Well, don't panic, as this is where your rapport comes in from earlier on in the first stage of the call. Now, like I said, building rapport is really important because when you do come across these challenges, it helps you to push through them. By using a good relationship that you have, you can overcome the challenges rather than just feel like you're hitting a brick wall. And you can overcome these challenges to achieve what it is that you're trying to do with your client and their business. So that's really important. Show them that you care about their time and the fact that this isn't just a business transaction. And if they're quiet or distracted, please don't be afraid to bring up something you mentioned earlier during the rapport phase, as this will re-engage them and make them more interested in what you have to say. And maybe, like I said, life gets in the way sometimes and they're trying to deal with a few business problems or barriers that they've run into, and that's totally fine as well. You've got to understand that and maybe perhaps suggest to them that you reschedule the call if today is not the appropriate day or hour. And like I said, that's really important to understand that you show care towards their time. Just to recap, the 3 stages we've covered so far is building rapport, transitioning from the report to business side, and dealing with difficult situations when in the call. Now let me just quickly break all those down again, just so we understand in a quick little section now what to do on a video call. So if you want, please feel free to screen record this and save it for later if you want a quick summary of what to do. Building rapport is all about making your client feel comfortable and having a laugh and a joke with them, maintaining a professional relationship. Now, when it comes to transitioning from the report to business side of things, you want to have a smooth transition and also make them feel heard as well. And dealing with difficult situations, you've got to understand that life gets in the way sometimes and perhaps suggest to them that rescheduling the call could be an option, or you just re-engage them by talking about something you brought up earlier in your rapport section of the call. Before we continue, I just wanted to mention that in about 3 weeks' time, roughly, I've got a client call coming up, so I'll be putting everything I say here into practice and you can see how it all works in a client call. Now, the next part of your call is all about getting down to the main point and the bread and butter of what you wanted to talk about when you initially had the intention of planning this call. Now, whether that be anything business related, goals related, objectives, absolutely anything, but this is the part where you need to mention what's important to you, but like I say, get your client's opinion and their thoughts on it, as it's their business you're trying to help out, or whatever it may be. Maybe you want to get them more leads, or maybe it might be social media management, whatever it may be. It's really important that you allow them to have their input, but like I said, get down to the main points, but lay it out nicely, talking, a nice, warm, comfortable tone so that they feel more open to your business proposals maybe you might have. It's really important to let the client feel heard in your ideas, but get your main points across. And like I said, this next section of the call should be where you get your main points across. So maybe you might want to have a target of increasing your followers if it's social media management, and you need to plan out a strategy and plan on how to do that. So, but always make sure that your client feels heard. Once you've put your main points across and you've come up with plans and strategies on how you're going to achieve these, then you want to move on to the next phase of the call, which is when are you going to reschedule your next call. I personally like to do this on a weekly basis and not a monthly basis, but this can heavily depend on the type of industry you're dealing with. It's really important to reschedule your next call so you know when you're going to have those next goals and objectives that you're going to set, because hopefully by then you will have hit the ones that you've realistically set for the next time you call them. Get that next date booked in, ready for when you're going to discuss the new plans and strategies and how to move forward with their business. Once you've done that, it's time to wrap up the call by going over everything that you've done and summarizing it, just to make sure you've heard everything correctly and you've got a clear plan and strategy on what to do and how to move forward with their business. So go over everything in detail, as well as making sure that you both understand what you're doing when it comes to the plans and strategies and goals and objectives and every single thing that you've talked about in the call, and you understand it all and you know how you're going to move forward with them. So that's really important, because if you misheard something and something goes wrong down the production line, then that probably will lead to them being more dissatisfied with you and not having as much trust in you. So just by checking you've heard everything correctly and going over everything at the end is really important, and this will lead to your client having more trust in you as you execute everything efficiently, seamlessly, without anything being needed from them, without any input from them, just this video client call that we're trying to build up right now. And by concluding the call, it's really important, because you need to make sure you've heard everything and your client understands everything that you've all said together to create the perfect plan or strategy is on how to move forward with their business. Once you've done all of that, wrap it up nicely, and that's your client call finished. Remember earlier I mentioned that I'll be doing a client call video where I implement everything I mentioned here into that video. Remember to take it one step at a time, and I'll see you in the next one.